My name is Hazel, and I am 30 years old. I am a wife, a mother, and on the surface, just an ordinary woman living a quiet life. But behind the calm exterior of who I am today lies a history so painful that even now, when I close my eyes, the voices of the past come rushing back. Voices that told me I was defective, useless, a burden. Voices that belonged not to strangers but to my own parents and sister. Sometimes I wonder if people would even believe me if I told them how cruel my family was. People like to think parents love equally, that mothers and fathers protect all their children, and that siblings share bonds stronger than rivalry. But my story is different. My story is about being the eldest daughter in a family that treated me as though I were nothing but an unwanted mistake. 9 years ago, I was cast out told to be independent, when what they really meant was they wanted nothing more to do with me. And yet life has a strange way of circling back. Because one day, when I thought I had finally escaped their shadows, I found myself face to face with all of them again, at a wedding where secrets would be exposed, masks would be ripped off, and the revenge I never planned for would unfold in ways none of us expected. That day began innocently enough. I was at a friend's wedding with my husband Philip and our little boy. We were in a glittering hotel surrounded by laughter and music. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe I belonged in such a place. While Philip chatted with his colleagues, I excused myself to the restroom. On my way back, I heard a voice, sharp, mocking, dripping with malice. "Oh, look at that defective item, why is she here?" For a second I froze. The words sliced through me, awakening the old wounds I had buried so carefully. I told myself to ignore it, to keep walking. But the voices grew louder, bolder, until one of them called after me. "You ugly thing, you can hear me, can't you?" My blood ran cold. My name is not Ugly Thing. My name is Hazel. I kept walking, my heels clicking against the polished floor. But then a hand grabbed my arm so tightly, it hurt. I spun around to find myself staring into the face of a woman whose features were painfully familiar. She gasped with exaggerated shock, clutching her arm as though I had hurt her. And then I heard it. "Julia, are you okay?" Julia, my younger sister. My mother rushed to her side, glaring at me as though I were some dangerous intruder. Confusion rippled through me. It had been 9 years since I last saw them, 9 years since I was kicked out like garbage. And now here they were acting as if I was the one who didn't belong. "Have you forgotten about me?" my sister sneered. "Yes, it seems you're as rude as ever. I'm your sister Julia, and this is our mother. Can you really claim you don't remember your own family?" Her words dripped with contempt, and my heart pounded in my chest. Memories came flooding back, my parents' voices telling me I wasn't good enough, that I would never amount to anything, that I should forget about college because it was wasted on me. The shame of those years burned like fresh wounds. But before I could reply, two men appeared, Julia's fiancé, Daniel, and my father. Daniel's face turned pale when he saw me, his expression betraying a shock he couldn't hide. My father, on the other hand, glared as though I had brought ruin simply by standing there. "What is she doing here?" he demanded. "She must have snuck in. This is unbearable. Call security." Julia clutched Daniel's arm dramatically. "Yes, please kick her out. She's a disgrace. We should have cut ties with her long ago." Their words stung, but what hurt more was that none of it surprised me. They had been saying these things my whole life. To them, I had always been the mistake, the failure, the defective child. Just then, Philip appeared at my side, his presence steady and protective. "Hazel." "There you are," he said gently, taking my hand. The whole room shifted when he arrived. My parents and sister fell silent, their eyes darting from him to me with dawning realization. Daniel, pale and nervous, tried to smooth things over. "Mr. Anderson, I apologize. My wife said some things she shouldn't have. Please forgive her." The moment my husband's name was spoken aloud, I saw it, the flicker of recognition in my parents' eyes. Anderson, the family of doctors, the prestigious hospital. They realized Philip wasn't just any man. He was their worst nightmare come true, proof that the daughter they had discarded had risen higher than they ever imagined. And in that moment I felt it, not triumph exactly, but a grim kind of justice. Still, the scene left me shaken. As I stood there hearing my parents call me an embarrassment, memories rushed back like poison. I remembered the nights when they told me I wasn't allowed to go to university, that I was defective and would never succeed. I remembered the sting of their words as they said, "You owe us. You should be grateful we even let you grow up." My sister Julia had basked in all the love and support they denied me. She was younger, prettier, the pride of the family. They gave her new clothes while I wore secondhand rags from dumpsters. They gave her tutors while they ripped up my study materials, laughing that I was too stupid to use them anyway. When she struggled, they lifted her up. When I struggled, they punished me. I had once begged them for the chance to go to college, but they laughed in my face. "College is for Julia, not you. You will work and support this family. That is your purpose." I still remember recording those words, holding on to them as proof of what I endured. Even back then, I knew no one would believe me unless I kept evidence. By the time I was 18, I had stopped hoping for their love. I saved what little money I could from part-time jobs, lied about my income so they couldn't demand more, and eventually found the courage to leave. I rented a small apartment and never looked back. They thought I'd crawl home eventually, begging for help. But I never did. I built my life from nothing. I studied in secret, worked harder than I ever thought possible, and created opportunities they swore I would never have. And 9 years later, here I was standing in the same room as them, no longer the broken girl they abandoned, but a woman who had survived, succeeded, and built a family of her own. And yet their words still cut, because deep down, the child inside me still longed for the love they never gave. As the wedding day unfolded, more truths began to surface. My parents, once proud owners of a thriving family clinic, were now struggling, their reputation crumbling under whispers of abuse and neglect. My sister, who had been groomed as the family's golden child, was about to marry into a lie she could no longer sustain. And I, Hazel the unwanted, the discarded, was suddenly the one with everything they had tried to deny me. But revenge, I've learned, doesn't always come with shouting or schemes. Sometimes it arrives quietly in the form of living well despite those who wished you wouldn't. And that day, as my family stared at me in disbelief, I realized the story was far from over. After the wedding encounter, my heart pounded like a drum for the rest of the evening. I barely tasted the food, barely heard the music. My husband Philip kept a protective arm around me, his steady presence, the only thing keeping me from crumbling. But even as I smiled politely at other guests, I felt my parents' eyes burning into me from across the room, filled with disbelief, confusion, and something darker, fear. It was strange, almost surreal. For 9 years, they had dismissed me as worthless, defective, unworthy of love or investment. Yet now they couldn't hide the way their expressions shifted when Philip's name was mentioned. Anderson. It wasn't just a name, it was power. The Anderson family owned one of the most prestigious hospitals in the city. My parents, once proud owners of a small clinic, had always been desperate to climb higher socially. And now they realized the daughter they had discarded was tied to everything they wanted. Julia. My younger sister tried to keep up her facade of perfection. She clung to Daniel's arm, laughing a little too loudly, smiling a little too wide. But I caught the flicker of panic in her eyes whenever she glanced at Philip. She knew even before anyone else did that her carefully constructed image was about to crack. Later in the evening, when the band played and couples danced, my mother cornered me near the hallway. Her lips were painted red, her perfume sharp and overwhelming, but her voice was low and urgent. "You should have told us," she hissed. "You should have said who you married. Do you realize what this means for our family?" I stared at her, stunned. Our family. The same family that threw me out. The family that told me I wasn't worth a college education, that I should work like a servant, while Julia was given everything. Her eyes darted nervously around the hall. "Lower your voice," she snapped. "You're not a child anymore. Don't dredge up the past. This is about now. If people knew the truth, they'd think we raised you well. You could help us restore our reputation." Her words were like poison. She wasn't sorry for what they had done. She wasn't reaching out to reconcile. She wanted to use me, just like always. I shook my head, my voice trembling with fury. "You never wanted me when I had nothing. And now that I've built a life without you, you want to claim me? No. I won't let you rewrite the story." Her face twisted with rage, and for a moment, I saw the same expression she used to wear when I was a teenager, begging for books for classes for something more than a life of drudgery. Back then, she had called me ungrateful. Now she called me selfish. Philip appeared then, slipping his hand into mine. His presence cut through the tension like light through fog. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. My mother forced a smile, masking her fury. "Of course," she said sweetly. "Just a family chat." And then she swept away, her heels clicking furiously against the floor. Philip turned to me, concern etched across his face. "Hazel, what did she say?" I swallowed hard. "Nothing new, just the same thing she's always said. Only now she wants something from me." He squeezed my hand gently. "They can't touch you anymore, remember that." I nodded, but inside the old wounds ached. Because even though I had escaped them, part of me still longed for their approval, their recognition. And I hated myself for it. The night ended, but the story did not. A week later, an invitation arrived in the mail. It wasn't addressed to me, but to Philip. It was from my parents inviting us to dinner at their house. The handwriting was my father's, stiff and formal. Philip looked at me across the table when he read it. "Do you want to go?" My first instinct was to rip it up, to throw it in the trash where it belonged. But something stopped me. For 9 years I had lived with unanswered questions. Why had they hated me so much? Why had they favored Julia to such extremes? Why had my life been worth less in their eyes? Maybe this dinner would give me answers. So I said yes. When we arrived, the house looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling, the yard untended. Inside, the air smelled faintly of mildew and desperation. My father greeted us stiffly, my mother with forced warmth, Julia with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The dinner was awkward, the conversation strained. They asked Philip about his work, his family, his future. They barely addressed me at all, except when my mother made veiled comments about how fortunate I was to have married so well. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "We should be honest," he said, his voice heavy. "The clinic isn't doing well. We've had financial troubles. Julia's wedding cost more than we expected. And well, since you and Philip are doing so well, we thought—" I slammed my fork down, my hands trembling. "No, absolutely not." They stared at me, stunned. "For years, you told me I was worthless. You refused to pay for my education, you forced me to work while Julia got everything. And now you expect me to hand over money? No, I won't." Julia's face twisted with indignation. "Don't be dramatic, Hazel. You know you're better off now. Why wouldn't you help your own family?" Family, I spat the word like it was poison. Family doesn't treat you like trash. Family doesn't tell you you're defective. Family doesn't rip up your books and laugh when you cry. You lost the right to call yourselves my family when you abandoned me. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's face turned red with anger, my mother's with shame, Julia's with fury. Philip reached for my hand, steadying me, and then I saw it on the mantel above the fireplace. A stack of papers carelessly left out. I recognized the handwriting instantly. My mother's. I excused myself under the pretense of looking at the photos and slipped one of the papers closer. My blood ran cold. It was a contract, a financial agreement between my parents and Julia's fiancé, Daniel. They had promised him money, a dowry, essentially in exchange for marrying Julia. Money they didn't have. Money they had hoped to get from me and Philip. I clenched the paper in my fist, my heart racing. This wasn't just about desperation. This was about deceit. They had built Julia's marriage on a lie, just as they had built my entire childhood on cruelty. I turned back to them, my voice steady but trembling with rage. "You haven't changed. You're still using people, still manipulating, still lying. And you think I'll save you? No. I won't let you drag me down with you." My mother tried to speak, but I cut her off. "You chose Julia. You made your decision long ago. Live with it." Philip and I left that night, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. I had walked into their house hoping for answers. What I found was confirmation of what I had always known. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had betrayed me. But the story wasn't over. Because secrets have a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply they're buried. And the truth about my family was darker than I ever imagined. After leaving my parents' house that night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every detail, the peeling paint on the walls, The bitterness in my father's eyes, the desperation in my mother's voice, and the contract I had seen on the mantel. I lay awake beside Philip, staring at the ceiling, wondering how a family could twist love into something so ugly. Philip turned to me in the dark and whispered, "You did the right thing. Don't torture yourself." But I couldn't stop. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more hidden beneath their lies, that the contract was just the beginning. The next morning I made a decision. I drove back to the house alone. Philip offered to come, but I shook my head. This is something I need to face myself. When I arrived, the front door was unlocked. My parents were out, probably at the clinic. The silence inside felt heavy, but I forced myself to climb the stairs to my mother's study. I opened drawers, searched through files, flipped through binders. And then I found a thick folder marked Julia. Inside were receipts, invoices, letters, designer dresses, private tutors, expensive vacations, all for Julia. And at the bottom, a set of bank statements showing how much debt my parents had taken on to keep up her image. They had drained everything for her, and when the money ran out, they promised Daniel's family a fortune they couldn't deliver. I sat there trembling, the folder heavy in my lap. All those years they told me there wasn't money for my college tuition, that I had to be independent, that education was a waste on me. They hadn't been struggling. They had been spending it all on Julia. The betrayal seared through me like fire. My parents hadn't just neglected me, they had sacrificed me. They had chosen Julia again and again until nothing was left. I stuffed the folder into my bag and left before they could return. That evening, Philip found me sitting at the kitchen table, the documents spread out in front of me. He read them carefully, his jaw tightening with every page. "Hazel," he said softly, "this isn't just favoritism, this is abuse. They robbed you of opportunities you deserved. They used you as a scapegoat to protect Julia's image." Tears burned my eyes, and now they want me to pay for their lies. They want us to save them from the mess they created. Philip reached for my hand. "We don't owe them anything. But maybe," he hesitated, "maybe this is your chance to show them the truth, to let them see what they've done." His words stayed with me. For so long I had carried the pain, silently convincing myself no one would believe me if I spoke. But now I had proof, bank statements, contracts, records of every sacrifice they forced me to make. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Julia's engagement party was scheduled for the following weekend at an upscale hotel. I hadn't planned to attend, but an invitation arrived anyway. Likely Philip's name was the reason. Part of me wanted to throw it away. But another part, the part still burning from betrayal, whispered, "Go." The night of the party, I wore a simple black dress. Nothing extravagant, nothing flashy. I didn't need glitter to make my presence known. When Philip and I arrived, the room glittered with chandeliers filled with guests sipping champagne and murmuring compliments about Julia and Daniel. My parents spotted us immediately. My mother's smile was tight, her eyes pleading. My father's jaw was clenched. Julia, radiant in her gown, beamed as though nothing could touch her. I stayed quiet through most of the evening, observing, listening. I watched as my parents bragged about Julia's accomplishments, about Daniel's family's wealth, about the bright future ahead. They spoke as if the debts didn't exist, as if their house wasn't crumbling, as if the contract wasn't binding them in chains of their own making. Finally, the moment came. Daniel's father, a stern man with sharp eyes, raised a glass to toast the couple. My parents looked proud, Julia radiant, Daniel visibly nervous. As the applause died down, I stepped forward. "I'd like to say something." The room quieted. Dozens of eyes turned to me. My parents stiffened. Julia's smile faltered. Daniel's hand twitched against his glass. I took a deep breath. 9 years ago, I was told I wasn't worthy of support. My parents said there was no money for my education, that I needed to be independent. So I left home with nothing. My voice trembled, but I forced myself to continue. What I didn't know then, but know now, is that the money wasn't gone. It was spent on Julia. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother stepped forward, her hand raised. "Hazel, stop this nonsense." But I pulled the folder from my bag and held it up. I have the receipts, the bank statements, the debts. The contract promising Daniel's family money that doesn't exist. For years, they poured everything into Julia, and when it wasn't enough, they tried to use me again. But I won't stay silent anymore. The room erupted in whispers. Julia's face went pale. Daniel's jaw tightened, and Daniel's father snatched the folder from my hands, flipping through the documents with growing fury. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice booming. My father's face turned crimson. Lies. Fabrications. But Daniel's father slammed the folder shut. "These are real. You've deceived us." He turned to Daniel, his voice cold. "We will discuss this later." Julia burst into tears, clinging to Daniel's arm. "It's not my fault I didn't know." But the look on his face said otherwise. He had known something, maybe not the details, but enough to fear this moment. My mother reached for me, her eyes desperate. "Hazel, please, don't do this. You'll ruin everything." I stepped back, my voice steady. "You already ruined everything when you chose lies over love, when you chose Julia over me again and again. I won't carry your sins anymore." The room was in chaos. Guests murmured, some glaring at my parents, others whispering about Julia. My father stood frozen, his pride shattered, my mother sobbing into her hands. Philip came to my side, his hand warm in mine. "It's time to go," he whispered. As we walked out, the whispers followed me like a shadow. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. That night, lying in bed, I replayed the scene again and again. The shock on Julia's face, the rage in my father's eyes, the desperation in my mother's voice. Part of me felt guilty for causing a scene, for humiliating them so publicly. But another part, the part that had been silenced for too long, felt vindicated. Revenge, I realized, doesn't always come with violence. Sometimes it comes with truth spoken loudly enough that no one can ignore it. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. My parents were too proud to accept defeat. Julia was too desperate to give up her crown as the favored child. And I wasn't done healing. Because even when the truth is revealed, the scars remain. The morning after the engagement party, I woke with a heavy weight in my chest. My phone buzzed relentlessly, missed calls, furious messages, even voicemails I couldn't bring myself to listen to. My parents, my sister, cousins, even distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Word had spread fast. Philip poured me coffee and kissed the top of my head. "You don't have to read any of it," he said softly. "They'll scream themselves hoarse, but it doesn't change the truth." But I did read them. And as expected, the messages weren't apologies, they were attacks. "How dare you humiliate us like that in front of everyone? You're jealous of Julia. You always have been. You think marrying Philip makes you better than us? You'll regret this when you're alone again." The venom in their words was the same venom I'd lived with my entire childhood. But this time, something inside me resisted. I wasn't their frightened scapegoat anymore. I was a woman who had spoken her truth, and they couldn't silence me again. Still, guilt gnawed at me. I had exposed Julia's engagement as a lie, destroyed my parents' last chance at saving face, and shattered what little family bond remained. At night, I lay awake wondering if I had gone too far. But then I would remember their laughter as they ripped up my college applications, their sneers as they called me defective, their coldness as they cast me out at 18. And I knew this wasn't vengeance, it was justice. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. I expected another angry relative, but when I opened it, Julia stood there. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked smaller than I remembered, fragile, almost childlike. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice trembling. Philip was at work, so it was just me and our son. I hesitated, then nodded. She stepped inside, clutching her purse like it was her lifeline. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, "Daniel called off the engagement." I swallowed. "I'm sorry." She shook her head. "No, you're not." Her words cut, but I let her speak. She collapsed onto the couch, her hands trembling. "I loved him, Hazel. Maybe he wasn't perfect, maybe our families were using each other, but I loved him. And now it's over. Because of you." I sat across from her, my chest tight. "Julia, I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because the lies had to stop. Our parents built everything on deceit, and I stopped myself breathing hard. You let them make me the villain while they handed you everything. You knew they were destroying me." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know the whole truth. I just thought you weren't trying hard enough." That's what Mom and Dad always said. That you didn't deserve college, that you didn't deserve more. I believed them. Hearing her admit it stung worse than denial. My own sister had swallowed the poison so deeply she couldn't see me for who I was. She looked at me. Then her face twisted with something between anger and despair. You got what you wanted. They all pity you now. They see you as the strong one, the survivor. But I lost everything. I was their favorite, and now I'm nothing. Her words broke something inside me. I had dreamed of hearing Julia acknowledge the truth of her apologizing for her part in my suffering, but instead she resented me for finally being seen. She stood abruptly, her voice shaking. You've ruined this family, Hazel. I hope you're happy. Then she stormed out, leaving me staring at the door with tears burning my eyes. That night I held Philip's hand in bed and whispered, "Why do I feel like I'm the villain?" He kissed my forehead. "Because they trained you to feel guilty for existing. But you're not the villain. You're the only one brave enough to break free." His words comforted me, but they didn't erase the ache. A week later, I was summoned to my parents' house again. This time, it wasn't an invitation, it was a demand. Against Philip's advice, I went. Some part of me still hoped for closure. The house looked worse than before, the air heavy with defeat. My father sat in his armchair, his expression hard. My mother stood by the window, her face drawn. Julia was absent. My father spoke first. "You've destroyed us, do you understand that?" I met his gaze. "No, you destroyed yourselves. I only showed the truth." His eyes narrowed. "You think you've won? You haven't. You've isolated yourself. No family, no support. When Philip leaves you, and you'll come crawling back, and there will be nothing left for you." His words were meant to cut, but I saw the fear behind them. He was losing control. For years he had dictated who I was, who I could be. Now he couldn't. My mother turned, her voice softer, but no less poisonous. "Hazel, you don't understand. We had to choose Julia. She was our chance to climb higher, to secure a future for us all. You were difficult, always asking for more, always wanting what we couldn't give. We needed you to sacrifice so Julia could shine." Tears blurred my vision. "Do you hear yourself? You sacrificed your own daughter for the other. You robbed me of opportunities, of love, of dignity. And now you expect sympathy?" For a moment, silence hung heavy in the room. Then my father leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. "You will regret this. You think your truth will set you free, but it will only destroy you." I stood, my legs trembling but strong enough to carry me out. At the door, I turned back. "I don't need you anymore. And that's what terrifies you." I left without another word. In the weeks that followed, their words echoed in my head. Julia avoided me. My parents seethed, extended family whispered. But for the first time in my life, I felt free. Their power over me was gone. They couldn't deny the truth anymore. And yet I knew this wasn't the end. Betrayal leaves wounds that don't close easily. And revenge, even when it comes in the form of truth, doesn't erase the scars. The real climax was still ahead. Because secrets once revealed have a way of destroying more than just reputations. They destroy illusions. And illusions were all my family had left. In the months that followed, my family's world collapsed piece by piece. Julia's broken engagement became the talk of our extended relatives. The whispers grew louder, how Daniel's family had been deceived, how the clinic had fallen into debt, how my parents' reputation was now nothing more than a pile of ashes. Patients stopped coming. Creditors started calling. The proud home I had once been banished from now stood as a monument to failure. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Because the truth about betrayal is that even when it brings justice, it also leaves scars. I didn't rejoice at Julia's tears or my parents' humiliation. I mourned what could have been an ordinary family where love was shared, not hoarded, where sacrifice was mutual, not demanded from one child to elevate another. Philip held me through many sleepless nights. "You've done what you had to," he reminded me. "You told the truth, that's all." But part of me still grieved. I grieved for the girl I had been at 18, begging for a chance at college. I grieved for every book they tore apart, every cruel word they spoke, every ounce of dignity they stripped from me. Most of all, I grieved for the love I had wanted so desperately, but never received. One afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar, my mother's. I hesitated before opening it, but curiosity overcame me. Inside was a single page. Hazel, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a reply. But I need you to know something. We thought we were protecting the family. We thought if Julia succeeded, we all succeeded. We thought sacrificing you was survival. But now I see we were wrong. You were stronger than all of us. And we failed you. I failed you. I am sorry. I stared at the words until they blurred. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But for the first time there was an admission, however small, that I had mattered, that my pain was real. I folded the letter and placed it in a box with the other remnants of my past. Not to treasure it, but to remind myself that even those who hurt us can sometimes glimpse the truth, if only too late. Julia never wrote. She vanished from my life as though I had never been her sister. My father never apologized. His pride wouldn't allow it. But my mother's letter was a crack in the armor, a sign that maybe, just maybe, the cycle of cruelty didn't have to continue forever. As for me, I built something new. I poured my energy into my students, into being the kind of mentor I had once needed. I created opportunities for young women who had been told they weren't enough, who had been silenced by voices louder than their own. I gave scholarships, wrote recommendations, opened doors. Every success they achieved felt like reclaiming a piece of what had been stolen from me. And in my own home with Philip and our son, I created the family I had always longed for. A family built not on favoritism or conditions, but on love freely given. I promised myself my child would never doubt that he was wanted, that his voice mattered, that he was enough exactly as he was. Sometimes late at night I wonder if my parents ever sit in their empty house and think about me. If they replay the moment I stood at Julia's engagement party and shattered the illusions they had built. If they regret choosing ambition over love, pride over family. But whether they do or not no longer matters, because I am free. My story is not one of triumph in the traditional sense. I didn't get revenge by destroying them. They destroyed themselves. My victory was surviving. My victory was refusing to become what they told me I was. My victory was building a life where I am loved, respected, and whole. And if you are listening to me now, if you have carried wounds from those who should have protected you, hear me clearly. Your worth is not determined by their blindness. You are not defective because they failed to see your value. You can rise, you can heal, you can build something beautiful, even from the ashes of betrayal. Sometimes justice is not about punishing those who wronged us. It is about living well despite them. So this is my truth. This is the story of the eldest daughter cast aside, who became the woman her parents never believed she could be. And though the scars remain, I wear them as proof that I survived. Thank you for staying with me through this. If my story resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories and leave me a comment below. Tell me if your family ever made you feel invisible, or if you found your own way to break free. Because in the end, our stories are not just confessions. They are bridges. And maybe by sharing them, we can all feel a little less alone.